The secret to good grades isn't how much you study or the amount of work you do. It's how you prepare which matters the most. Think about what your teacher is trying to test you on. They're not testing you on how much material you can memorize and then spit back out onto a piece of paper later. They're testing you on how much you've mastered the material. Now, how do you improve your mastery? It's definitely not by just rereading your notes over and over again. Doing practice tests and making flashcards can help, but there's a much better way. The secret to mastery is teaching. Have you ever heard the phrase, explain it to me like I'm 5? It's the concept of breaking down a complex topic and explaining it in a way that a 5-year-old would understand. It's one of the best ways to understand a new piece of material without having all of the background info. And it's one of the best study tools that we have at our disposal. Think about how you explain what you're studying to your friends and family. Chances are when they ask you a question, you have to pause and think of how to explain it in a way that they'd understand. That thought process is exactly what we're aiming for, and we're going to use it to help you ace your finals. Anybody can read straight from a textbook and answer a professor's question, but how many people actually understand what they're saying? For example, you might know that in economics, a price floor is only effective when it's above the equilibrium price. But what does that actually mean? Would somebody who's never taken an economics course in their life understand what you just said? Probably not. But can you explain it in a way that they can? That's our goal, to understand something so thoroughly that you can explain it to anyone. Why bother doing this though? Well, think about the last exam that you took. How many of the questions asked you just to state a fact or give some rule that you learned in class? Outside of some multiple choice questions, probably not very many. Most higher level exams and the questions on them ask you to apply something that you've learned to a specific scenario. Essay questions even go a step further, asking you to explain your rationale for the answer. In order to apply something and explain your thought process, you actually have to understand the material. It's like doing a math problem and only putting down the final answer. If you can't show your work and explain how you got to that answer, then you don't get full credit. And you can't show how you got to an answer if you don't understand how you got there yourself. That's where the idea of teaching comes into play. By explaining something to another person, you're forced to start thinking about it in a new way and actually start understanding the material. If you can't explain what the last class was about to a classmate who wasn't there, then you don't understand that lesson well enough to apply it on an exam. And that's our final goal, for you to understand the material so thoroughly that you could explain it in a way that a 5-year-old would get. Here's what I want you to do. Take whatever material you're working on right now and pretend like you're explaining it to a friend that missed the last class. Take your time and think through exactly what you'd say and how you'd say it so that way they fully understand what the lesson was about. If you can't do it right away, don't worry. Just keep thinking it through and go back to your notes if you need to. The goal isn't for you to understand everything right away. We're trying to improve your understanding by getting you to think about the material in a new way and articulate those thoughts. Thinking through the material this way will help reinforce it into your memory, and it'll help you understand exactly why things work the way they do. Plus, being able to explain it to somebody else shows that you really understand the material and it improves your communication skills. This way, when you go into your final, you'll already know how to articulate the concept in a way that shows just how much you understand it. Once you feel like you'd be able to explain the concept to a classmate, think about how you'd explain it to a family member. Remember that pause I mentioned when you're thinking of how to articulate the idea so that they'd understand it? That's exactly what we're going for. That pause is you taking the time to think the material through and actually break it down into its component parts, so that way you can put it back together in a simplified version for somebody else. Being able to do that with a concept means that you'd easily be able to apply it when you see it in a scenario on your exam. The easiest way to put this technique into practice is to meet up with a friend or a study group and work on explaining the concepts to each other. If there's something that somebody doesn't get, then explain it to them so that way they do understand it. You'll be helping to improve your own understanding and theirs at the same time. If nobody can explain it in a way that they understand, then you all probably need a refresher on the material. So go back and rewatch the lecture or look over your notes from that class. If you're really stuck, then ask the professor to explain it again, and think of how he breaks it down for you. If you don't have a study group that you can do this with, then try explaining the material to a friend or a family member that's interested in it. Also, if you don't feel comfortable doing this with other people, pretend like you don't know the info, and think of how you'd explain it to yourself. Personally, I didn't have a study group this semester, so I did live streams where I explained legal concepts to the chat. If there was anything that I couldn't explain or felt like I was struggling to get across, once the stream was over, I'd go back and review that material. This really helped me zone in on my weak points and also reinforce what I already understood. If you really want to improve your understanding, then keep trying to explain the concept until you feel like you'd be able to explain it to a 5-year-old. Once you reach that point, you'll have truly mastered the topic. Remember, your goal when studying is to improve your understanding as much as possible. You want to know the information so thoroughly that you'd be able to explain it to anybody that wanted to learn. If you can do that, then you'll never struggle to apply the material on an exam. Just think about the person who knows the most about the topic you're studying, your professor. And their job is to explain the material to people all day long. With that, good luck on your exams. Hopefully you do well. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the comments. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time.